Hello everybody and welcome to the first ever show and episode of The Extra Point, the RFL update. For those of you just joining in, just finding out a little bit about the league, well, we are going to be talking, of course, in this podcast series and these shows about the Retro Football League, the latest Draft Day Sports Pro Football 23 multiplayer league. And well, we've got an interesting show for you today, and I'm sure we're going to have many great discussions over the coming seasons to talk about. But for those of you maybe have not necessarily seen the RFL or not looked into it, check the links out below. You can access the Discord there and have a little bit of a look into the league. But basically, this is a really interesting league that it's just started up a couple of weeks ago as part of the launch of the new version of Draft Day Sports Pro Football. And it is a really different take on how to do a multiplayer league. It's going to be focusing a lot on the era of the 1976, so the first sort of main era of the NFL being formed, teams coming together. We're going to be talking about some legends today, some really interesting teams to discuss. And what's great about the league really is that you get to build your history as your own. So if you are one of the founding fathers of the league, you can take one of your teams or one of the players that maybe you follow through your childhood, through your teenage years and into later life, and trying to change that history. Do you necessarily want the Detroit Lions to be a team that struggled through many decades, had some great players though through the era? Great opportunity for you to try and take a team like Detroit and try and bring them glory and really change that history. So it's really in your hands. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about how the history of the RFL goes alongside the history of the NFL, and we'll talk all of those things through many episodes to come. But today, the league hasn't started yet. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the teams, some of the players, and crazy enough, there's already been some trades, so we've got to talk trades as well. Where should we start? I mean, I think probably the best place for us to begin in this show is to take a little bit of a look at some of the teams of the era and some of the players, and have a little bit of a discussion about what I'm excited about, what I think maybe some of the league is excited about, and trying to build up some of that picture before we obviously get into games and get into even more trades and all kinds of things happening. So for those of you who probably weren't around in 1976, I certainly was not. I did a little bit of background reading about some of the era, and well, I mean, there's probably two teams I'm really excited to see how they perform in this obviously this simulation engine in comparison to real life. And well, I mean, the first place to kind of start really, it has to be the Oakland Raiders. And well, a team of the era. I mean, they went 13-1 in this particular time, and well, I mean, their roster is just absolutely phenomenal really when you look at it. And let's try and break ourselves and have a little look into the team itself and just see why they were just such a dominant team really, to be honest with you. Let's break it down. Let's go and have a little look at some of these players, right? So obviously in terms of the quarterback position, Ken Stabler looks like a good prospect, a good player in this era. He's got some amazing accuracy, intelligence and arm. Really good pocket passer. So it's going to be great to see how he does. But I mean, they've got talent all over the field really. I mean, Kyle Garrett is a pretty decent running back, really good speed and agility, and obviously of this era, they went 13-1, had a fantastic performance. You got likes of Gene Upshaw, who I'm sure you all know from the Hall of Fame in here. Some really good offensive linemen. Art Shell. I mean, the list goes on and on really. I mean, if you're just talking about Hall of Fame guys, Dave Dalby, that O-line is probably one of the best in the league. So you can probably see already why this team was good in 1976, and obviously probably going to be pretty good here. Looking across, you've got some decent receiving options, but I mean, that team is going to run and pound the ball, to be perfectly honest with you. The only thing you could probably pick up on is that maybe they've got too many running backs, but I mean, I guess it probably is that era. They had a lot of guys who played fullback and running back, played similar positions, but I mean, there's a lot of great talent there on the offensive side. If we move ourselves over to sort of the defensive line, a little bit more of a question mark, I guess. They've got some good players. I probably wouldn't say they've got any real major elite players on this side of the ball, if I'm being honest, looking through this roster here. But, I mean, Willie Brown is obviously decent, and, they're going to be really, really tough to beat, I think. And you can see why they went 13-1 in this era, really. And, I mean, if we go over to the league media and we have a little look at their team report in the magazine, let's have a look at that and just see exactly what this game is ranking them at. So, they've obviously lots of B's and C's and D's. I mean, that's probably fairly consistent across most of the league. But, they've got likes of Shell and Brown, as we've mentioned, and number 4 offensive rank, 16th defense. Their special teams rank is actually pretty poor, but can't really do too much to influence that. So this team is going to be a really, really strong offensive juggernaut. I mean, that offensive line is just phenomenal. It's probably one of the best that I've seen, certainly in any other multiplayer league. They're going to just be really, really, really tough. So that's one team I thought is worth just picking up on. I mean, as I said, they went 13-1 in that era, and let's just have a little look whilst I'm flicking through and just see really how they did it. To be honest with you, so just to give you some sort of backgrounds, they went 13-1. They basically scored 350 points, which was, I think, third best in the league at that time. Obviously had a fantastic performance, went on and obviously won the Super Bowl in the end, I think. So they, dominated this era really, and I'm sure they're going to probably be a really tough team to beat this year. So no surprise that we should be talking about the Oakland Raiders. Another team that I think is worth probably mentioning is Dallas, and the reason I say Dallas is there was a couple of teams of this era that obviously went and won sort of 10-11 games. I'm really excited to see how this Dallas Cowboys team does, and the reason I say this is because they've got some really interesting questions to try and answer in this start of the RFL, and it's not necessarily because I think they're going to be a bad team or they're not going to be a good team. I think they're going to be a very strong team again, like this era, but they've got some interesting questions to try and address, and I think it's probably a good place to kind of start, and we can start trying to break down some of the players as well. So just going to the quarterback position, you've got 2 really good quarterbacks. You've got Roger Staubach, who is really, really good player, going to be a phenomenal pocket passer, and he's going to have agility and speed to get out and scramble as well. So really interesting to see whether they go with him or Danny White. So you've got the likes of Staubach, who is older, probably coming towards the end of his career. And then you've got the likes of Danny White, who's just starting his career really, and looks like he could be really, really strong competition for Staubach. So I'm going to be really interested to see how they do that. And the question becomes, do they trade the young buck in White, stick with the old veteran, or whether they try and keep them both and try and keep them both happy, because that's obviously going to be a challenge as well. And then at the running back position, they've got a similar sort of interesting challenge. They've got the likes of Charlie Young, who is a really, really good speed agility guy. He's not particularly that intelligent or strong. His hands are not too bad. And then they've got the likes of Robert Newhouse, who is just a complete speedster, to be perfectly honest with you. Slightly, both very, very similar in terms of ability. And it'd be interesting to see how they manage distributions between those 2 guys, because on paper they're both very good, both similar ages. Whether they trade one or move one is going to be an interesting challenge for them to try and have a look at. And it's very similar when you sort of look down some of the rest of the pack really. They've got 2 decent tackles in Neely and Wright. I think that offensive line probably needs a little bit of help, I think, if they're going to be a true competing team. But I'm really, really interested just basically on that offensive side, how they manage that particular set of battles that they've got to really, really try and work their way through, I think. And I don't know how it'll play out and how the development of some of those guys will go, but it's just an interesting one to try and point out, because Dallas, obviously, of this era were very good. They were up there with one of the top sets of teams of the era, and I think they're probably going to be up there or thereabouts, but they've got some interesting questions to try and deal with. And I think the third team that I really wanted to talk about in terms of elite teams, before we talk about some of the interesting teams possibly for like rebuilding or just what people will do, is Pittsburgh, and it's not surprising. Pittsburgh were just an incredibly good team. They have been an incredibly good team for most of the eras of the NFL. But my goodness me, have they got some fun players that you just even now you can see just looking through. So you got the likes of Terry Bradshaw, who's just an amazing Hall of Fame quarterback, unbelievable accuracy, intelligence, arm. You name it, he's got it. He's a good age. He's 28. He's gonna probably still have many elite years left. Obviously, lockdown, that's always fantastic to see for Steelers fans. And then running back, they've got Franco Harris, again, another Hall of Famer. Unbelievable strength, agility, and speed. Good hands as well. You know, what a dynamic combination they're going to have there, really, when you look through some of this. You know, obviously, talking about the Steelers, we've obviously got to talk about defense as well, but let's just make our way down through the list here. You know, you've got L.C. Greenwood, an amazing defensive end. I mean, he is probably going to be up there for Defensive Player of the Year. I'd be surprised if he is not. So you've got that type of talent, just basically hanging around in this Steelers team. Got some really, really good players. Obviously, Donnie Shell, we haven't even mentioned, another Hall of Famer. They're just sitting there waiting. And then you get to the linebacking core, and this Steelers team with this linebacking core. My goodness me, I'm still amazed. For those of you watching, the Steelers currently, as I record this, don't have a GM yet, and I mean, if someone takes over this team, it's a bit like getting the Patriots in the early 2000s with Brady and co, because you just got talent everywhere, and it makes your life a lot easier if you've got this kind of talent. I mean, the likes of Andy Russell, incredible player. Obviously aging now, but still, really, really good player. Jack Lambert, new up-and-coming young stud in terms of a linebacker. And, Jack Ham, another sort of really good experienced prospect, not really prospect now, experienced player now. So you've got a good combination of veteran talent, young elite talent, and guys who are sort of in this, coming towards the beginning of their prime, really, in that linebacking core. And if you add that into the likes of L.C. Greenwood, wow, that Steelers team, I mean, let's go to the league media, because will be surprised if they are not ranked highly on their defense. So let's have a quick look. But I mean, that you've got basically one of the best quarterbacks of this era combined. Yeah, they are defensive rank number one combined with that defense. Wow, I mean, they say defense wins championships, and we talked about Oakland with their offense, Steelers with their defense. It'll be really interesting to see how those two different styles kind of combine, and whether GMs come in and make changes to try and bring different types of talent in. But I'm really excited to see those three teams in particular up the top, because I think they are the three that I sort of stood out for in terms of challenges they have, or just in terms of just pure eliteness is just fun. And then there's one team that I'm just fascinated by, just to see how they do, really, in terms of looking down the bottom. Because if you're a GM coming into a new league like the RFL, where you're starting in 1976, and you can basically build this history of your team. Some guys will obviously come in and take teams like Pittsburgh or the Raiders because they like those teams, or because they just like those players, or they want to take a top team and see if they can emulate that championship success that they would have had. But there's also other GMs who take teams like Tampa Bay, who in 1976, to give you some background, were undoubtedly the worst team in the NFL at this time. And they went on a completely terrible 0-14 run through the season. They only scored 125 points, conceded 412 points, which is, I believe, the second worst in the entire league, just behind the likes of the Seattle Seahawks. So this is a team that on paper is just atrocious, and it's going to be really interesting to see. I think a GM has taken this team, and it's going to be fun to see how they basically try and rebuild this team, and whether it can become a championship team in the long run. But they've got some real serious work here. I mean, this this quarterback core is pretty depressing, if I say the least. I mean, look at this. This is just like, it's almost like the Raiders, the Cowboys, and the Steelers are playing in a completely different league to this team at this moment in time. I mean, there are some bright spots. I mean, we can talk a little bit about Charlie Davis, who looks like an okay running back. Looks like he's solid enough to start, but I mean, this team all over is going to be really, really tough to try and build with. And hats off to I'm not sure the GM's name is taken over now, but hats off to you for taking on that challenge, because that is going to be a serious rebuild. And I think that's one of the great things about this league and starting in this era is that you can really pick your type of challenge that you want. And like I said, you can take a team that is like Tampa, completely down the bottom, got absolutely no chance of winning a championship this year, or you can take a team that's at the top and see if you can keep them at the top and keep them going. And it's going to be really, really fun to see how that kind of plays out. And of course, there's not just teams we can talk about. We can also talk about some of the fun players of this era. And I mean, we've mentioned Terry Bradshaw, but we'll talk about some of the other quarterbacks as well that I think are worth us having a little look at, just to give you a sense of some of the quarterbacks in this era are just amazing. So obviously you've got the likes of Joe Namath, again, coming towards sort of the back end of his career, but definitely the best quarterback in the league. Arm intelligence, accuracy, everything you'd want in an elite quarterback. Really, really good player. I mean, the Jets, I think, have already started shopping him, if I remember rightly. But, if you are a massive Joe Namath fan and you wanted that chance to maybe have him in a multiplayer league and see if you can win a championship for him, good opportunity to try and pick him up. You've also got Fran Tarkenton, another Hall of Famer. Again, probably last bit of his era really coming through before we get that next batch of elite quarterbacks to come through. But I mean, again, arm, accuracy, intelligence, agility, all just in abundance for these guys, really. Got Theismann as well. Wow, I mean, it really is quarterbacks. There's some really good quarterbacks of this era, and you kind of, for me, I wasn't around in this type of era, but you know the names, and you know the names through the Hall of Fame. You know them as the old guys who turn up to the podium, give their speech, or pick up their jersey, their jacket, and it's going to be fascinating to see how some of these actually do play out in this era, and trying to really kind of get that flavour for it. And I think the other position I wanted to talk about, really, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about a whole range of positions as we go through this era, and we talk about awards and all kinds of things coming on these shows. But I want to talk about the running backs, because some of these running backs, I mean, my goodness me. OJ Simpson, obviously, real life aside, was a really, really good running back, and then 29 years old, he's got everything in this league that you'd ever want for the Bills. Going to be interesting to see how he does. Obviously, he would probably not necessarily be forced to retire or anything like that, so he's going to have a bit of a longer probably career here than he did have in real life, and it's going to be fun to see how he does. Walter Payton is the one that I'm particularly really excited about, because for those of you who've maybe followed the channel before in the CSFL and other multiplayer leagues, I really, really rate running backs who have elite speed, and Walter Payton has elite speed, and I'm going to be really interested to see how he performs in terms of his stats. I think he could be absolutely incredible for the Bears, and their push probably to try and do better than their run sort of in real life, where they kind of faltered out sort of middle of the pack in this era. But Walter Payton, 22 years old, could be arguably the best running back we'll ever see in the RFL if things go right, in my opinion. He's got the age, got longevity on his side to try and do that. And then of course we've got the likes of Franco Harris, who we mentioned earlier, the likes of Greg Pruitt, really, really good running back again with speed. Jim Click, John Riggins, all these guys, you kind of, for me, I know the names, but I haven't necessarily seen the performance other than the odd bit of footage that you see in the vault on the NFL site, for example. So I'm really interested to see how they do, and I can't wait. And obviously, the other great thing about the RFL is that we do have the players coming through the different eras through the drafts. So we'll see some of the greats come through as we get into the sort of the next era of the RFL. We'll probably see the style of play of the games change as well, which is fantastic how they're going to try and do that. So really, really interested to see that. But I thought we'd end the episode talking a little bit about a couple of trades that have actually happened, and just to get a flavour for some of the things that have actually sort of been discussed. So whilst the league and the games haven't started yet, we've had 2 trades. Some GMs have come in and started to already make some transactions, do some wheeling and dealing, to try and get their teams into a better position, either for this season or for the longer run. So the first one that we should probably talk about is the San Diego Green Bay trade, which essentially sent Gary Johnson from San Diego and Mike McCoy from Green Bay. So let's have a little look at that. So in terms of San Diego, let's get to the, maybe we'll go to the dashboard, that might be quicker to find it. And it was basically a straight player swap. If we go into the roster, let's have a little look. So that, obviously San Diego picked up Mike McCoy, so a cornerback. So picked up a pretty good cornerback. Got speed, agility, strength. Tackling's a little bit of a low number, but you can see why they picked him up. Basically, they just needed a cornerback, to be perfectly honest with you. And then in terms of Green Bay, obviously picking up the likes of Gary Johnson. Let's have a look at Gary Johnson. So it was more of just, I think, a bit of a need swap for these guys. Making a bit of a switch around there, mainly for positional reads, but there was a massive blockbuster trade that happened on the second one. So the Packers sent the next 2 first-round picks, the next 2 second-round picks, and Sweeney Williams for Jones of Dallas. So let's have a little look at Dallas here. So they sent away Ed Too Tall Jones, who is a really, really good defensive end. Good age as well at 25. 2 years on that contract though is a little bit of a gamble, I would say. For basically the house, they sent every single asset for this guy. So the question mark would be in my mind would be, is Green Bay good enough to really utilise that to its full effectiveness? I mean, they have literally sent everything in terms of draft assets at the top end away for this guy, who only has 2 years on his contract. I do wonder whether that will play out. I mean, obviously, if Green Bay go on and they win 2 championships, 1 championship, then it absolutely was worth it. But I do think that was a little bit pricey, a little bit of a immediate sort of thing without possibly playing some games and just seeing how your team performs. But we'll see how it plays out. And that kind of brings us to the end of the show for this week. As I said, we'll be back with many other shows. I'm currently in the process of hopefully lining up the commissioner of the RFL to come and talk and tell us a little bit about the vision for the league, a little bit about some of the fun things that are probably going to go on throughout the season. But we'll obviously be back to talk about all kinds of things, trades, transactions, see how this league develops, see how stats play out, see how the history of the RFL compares to the NFL. But as always, guys, if you've got any thoughts, comments of things that you want to see, discussions you want to happen, drop me a line on the server on the RFL on Discord and or on the comment section here, and we'll be sure to address it in future episodes. But it's not going to be long now until we actually see some games probably, and that is going to be the fun thing to watch out for, and I will certainly be back to discuss those when it happens.